Hi, I'm Mary Sue Rominger. I'm on the board of directors and a volunteer for the Bateman Horn Center. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. We will be posting a video of tonight's presentation on our YouTube channel within the next few days. Our speaker tonight is Dr. Akiko Okifuji. Dr. Okifuji is a professor in the Department of Anesthesiology at the University of Utah. She has been actively coordinating clinical research in the field of chronic pain, particularly in fibromyalgia, for the past 20 years. She's also a clinical psychologist practicing at the University of Utah Pain Management Center. And she recently joined the Bateman Horn Center Board of Directors and brings valuable insight to the board, especially on research-related issues. Tonight, she will be discussing what we know about the impact of life factors on fibromyalgia and the latest view on how we may be able to improve them. Please welcome Dr. Akiko Okifuji.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Mary Sue, for the kind introduction. So I am very happy to be here. Thank you for coming today in this heat. And I am just happy to be here to share some of the things that we've been working on at the Pain Research and Management Center at the University of Utah. So we take the life factors in chronic diseases, chronic pain, particularly fibromyalgia, very seriously. Because illness doesn't happen outside life, obviously. And we understand the impact of life factors and also the disease itself onto life factors. And they kind of form a vicious cycle and impacting each other and creates sort of a spiral down. So what we're going to focus on today is some of the critical life domains that includes eating, sleeping, and activity, things we do. So all these domains are adversely impacted by fibromyalgia. So we're going to go into it to see what the relationship is about. So we're going to first talk about eating and weight issues, weight management, obesity issues. So as you know, obesity is an epidemic in our country. And we basically are at the top of the world when it comes to obesity. If there is obesity Olympics, we'll have the gold medal. And we have 5% more than the second distant country, nation of Mexico. So that's been a big problem. The obesity comes with other kinds of health issues, obviously. And that may also come into play for chronic pain patients as well. So we wanted to see how common this problem is in fibromyalgia patients. And then we just looked into 215 people with fibromyalgia that we had in a treatment study. And so the obesity was measured by body mass index, which is sort of like a ratio of height to weight. There's a calculation that you can do. And anybody whose body mass index of greater than 30 is categorized as obesity. And about half of these people we looked into actually were in the obese range, with additional 30% in an overweight range, leading to only 23% who are in a normal, what we call the normal weight range. When we look into the Utah obesity rate, it's about 25% now. We're actually quite healthy. We are the 7th lowest adult obesity rate in the nation. So compared to that, within the fibromyalgia population, we're doubling the obesity rate. And when you look at how this obesity issue may be impacting life in fibromyalgia, it actually have a lot of implications. So obesity was related to sleep problems. So they tend to have shorter sleep duration, longer time. It took them longer to fall asleep. And their sleep was less efficient, and they tend to wake up more through the night. So they have a quantity-wise and quality-wise, their sleep is worse. And obesity is also related to, not surprisingly, less physical function. So they tend to have less endurance level, and their muscle strength is not as strong. So it's affecting the both sleep and activity side. It's a significant comorbid problem. And not only the life functions, when we look at their blood, it's a subsample of the people we looked at. So we particularly wanted to see what their sort of chemical indices for stress and inflammation. That's what we looked at. And obesity was a significant factor for both of them. So cortisol level, which is a stress hormone, norepinephrine, C-reactive protein is sort of like a general index for your inflammation level. They're all elevated in obesity group. And when you look at the correlations, so IL-6, interleukin-6 is also a very known pro-inflammatory, so inflammation type of cytokines that's also associated with things like fatigue. So when you're like a flu, when you have flu-like symptoms, IL-6 is elevated significantly. So if you are injected, let's say, if you're swimming in the IL-6 pool, you're going to feel very, very sick. So obesity was also related to that substance and epinephrine as well, which may not be terribly surprising because obesity is also known to be an inflammatory condition. Some of the inflammation markers like IL-6 is actually produced within the fat cells. So the more fat cells you have, the more pro-inflammatory factors you have. So that doesn't help. That might also be a confounding thing that might make your symptoms worse. Okay. So when you look at obesity and pain in general, there tend to be correlations. Now, that's not necessarily the causal effect relationship. It's not like obesity is causing pain or pain is causing the obesity. But there are a lot of factors that are so connecting those two conditions together, including the structural mechanical loading. So the heavier you are, the more loading onto your joints, and the more loading your joints have, surrounding muscles have to work harder. So that tends to impact your pain. And we talked about inflammation issues. Sleep, we also talked about. Obesity is also known to impact sleep, and so, of course, that's pain. Depression is also known to be prevalent in both obesity and pain. And the lifestyle issues is huge. Both conditions tend to make people more sedentary, so that the less activities you have, that kind of leads into actually the more problems overall in your life. Okay, so let's talk about sleep now. Again, probably preaching to the choir, but is sleep an issue in fibromyalgia? Of course it is, right? So we asked 322 patients. Majority of them, 80 or 85% people said the lack of sleep tend to make their symptoms worse. And not necessarily the lack of sleep, may not be the quantity issue, but the quality of sleep. The poor sleep tends to also make their symptoms worse. But if they have a good night's sleep, they feel a lot better next morning. So the sleep and the fibromyalgia seems to be very closely related in some way. So how do you know how much you're sleeping and how well you're sleeping? Of course, you can ask yourself, so how did you sleep last night? We talk about that all the time. It's a regular conversation, right? It's probably one of the best things, but it's tricky because if you are feeling bad in the morning, if you're feeling a lot of achiness, you're fatigued, you feel stiff, that influences actually your recall of how you slept the previous night. Because you kind of anchor in, I'm not feeling so well, I must not have slept that well. So your answer may be a little bit anchored by the way you're feeling right now. So the gold standard for sleep evaluation is polysomnography. So you get to go to the sleep lab, you sleep in a strange room with all kinds of things attached to your head, But that's the most thorough evaluation you can do from the quantity and quality of sleep. You can look into sleep architecture. You can look into the apnea indices, all these good things. But it's expensive. It's very difficult to do, and it's a lot of time commitment on your part. And besides, you're gonna have to go into a strange place, and you're gonna have to sleep under watchful eyes of strangers. So how typical would your sleep be under the circumstance? So that's another question. So what we decided to do is to use the actigraphy. So actigraphy is like a wristwatch. That's what it looks like, and you can wear that on your wrist. And that's a three-dimensional recording of the movement. So minute by minute, it's recording basically the movement of your body. And based upon that, we can get the indices of activity levels, your movement. And there's an algorithm you can use to calculate the sleep quantity and quality. So it isn't a perfect measure of sleep, but it actually gives you the proxy measure of how well you're doing at night. So you can get time in bed and how many minutes you slept, and based upon that, we can calculate how efficient your sleep is. We can look into sleep onset latency. That means how long you took to fall asleep since you hit the pillow. And also how many minutes you've been awake through the night. So that's, and a nice thing about it is that this is the sleep in your own home. So it's a more natural sort of assessment and real-time assessment. That's why we like it. So when we looked at fibromyalgia, women with fibromyalgia versus healthy women, but both of them are very sedentary. This is a very sedentary group of people. They're not that different in terms of the sleep, which kind of surprised us. The amount of minutes that they spend in bed are pretty equivalent. So this is based upon the 7 nights. The average per night, maybe a half an hour longer for fibromyalgia and slightly longer in terms of the sleep minutes. So given that sleep efficiency was actually worse for the fibromyalgia patients, they're not as efficient at night. Pretty much the same amount of sleep latency, so about 25 minutes to fall asleep. But the fibromyalgia patients have longer minutes of awakening through the night. So we tried to see how that relates to the insomnia index scores. That's the insomnia symptoms. And not surprisingly, the sleep efficiency as well as the nighttime awakening is significantly related. Interestingly, we are also interested in telomere length. Do you know what that is? You might be familiar with that. So telomeres are sort of like a cap that's kind of attached to the ending part of your chromosome. And that the length of that is considered as an indication of cellular aging. So when you are born, you have a long, not like long, but a fairly long, lengthy telomere. But as the cell divides and as you get older, you are exposed to more oxidized stress and things like that. Slowly, it kind of gets shorter and shorter. So that aging is a big factor. But also we know that some chronic illnesses tends to make your telomere length shorter, like cancer, diabetes, those kind of illnesses are related to the short. So there's some indication that fibromyalgia may be related to the cellular aging issues, but we didn't quite find that. It may be because we didn't have as many people as we wanted to have the comparison-wise. But interestingly, the sleep duration seems to be significantly related to the cellular aging indication. So the longer you sleep per night, the longer the length. The shorter, more cellular aging that the telomere length is showing. Okay. So okay, we can take a look at the people who sleep shorter versus longer. So we had 312 people who did the actigraphy for a week. So these are all fibromyalgia patients. And we divided them into the people who slept less than 6 hours versus more than 6 hours. So the shorter sleep, longer sleep. And so on average, the shorter sleepers had about less than 6 hours, less than 5 hours of sleep. Right? Yeah, okay. And the longer sleep people had an average of 7 hours per night. Sleep latency, shorter sleepers actually took longer, slightly longer per night. And their sleep efficiency was much worse, actually, when they are not sleeping that much. And look at that. Look at the awakening minutes. It's not quite a double, but close. 52 minutes versus 29 minutes. And they are a lot more moving through the night. Even if they are not awake, they are still moving through the night. So that's an indication of disturbed sleep. But interestingly, if you ask them, so how did you sleep? So the question was, how refreshed do you feel when you wake up? That's not different. So they don't report necessarily that their sleep is worse, but any indications you have, you look at it, that their sleep probably is not as good as it could be. And the poor sleep is related to other things. So this is based upon the insomnia symptom index. But the greater the symptoms of insomnia, the greater, this is the depression scores. So the higher the insomnia symptom index, higher the depressive symptoms. Same thing, the higher the insomnia index scores, higher the perceived, the how much pain is interfering with your ability to do things you want to do. So it's more difficult to do things and enjoy life. So that's a problem. So sleep clearly is important. And it's probably not just the quantity, but the quality of sleep. We just need to get down to that level to understand what's going on. So, good. The activities. So, we know activity is good, right? And you probably heard that exercise and activation type of things can be helpful. I know it's hard to do. It's very difficult to do, but if you can stick with it, if you can find a way to become a little more active, that kind of things tend to improve your fibromyalgia symptoms. Okay, so we talked about improving physical function, but what does that really mean? Does that mean that how many minutes you do, or what kind of things you do, how often you do, so on and so forth? So there are a lot of different parameters we're not looking into. So typically in research, you look into, you just are trying to increase the minutes of specific activities like walking or aerobic things, biking or things like that. But is that all there is to it when it comes down to activities? All right, so I know this is kind of like a very strange graph, but one of my postdocs actually was interested in the rhythms of activities. Okay, so remember the actigraphy data. So we have a minute by minute activity recording over 7 days. So we have lots of data. And using that, and I can't exactly know what it is, but we can use a cosine mathematical function to calculate certain parameters of activity and rhythms. So based upon that modeling, we could come up with, in addition to how much people are doing something, so we can have average activity level over a week. So certainly we can do that. But in addition to that, we can look into how consistent the activity levels are on a day-to-day basis across the week. We can also look at the peak time of your activity. So when are you peaking in terms of activity? Some people are morning people, some people are night owls. So people have different peaking time. So we get to go into that. And based upon that, we can also look into how consistent your peaking time is. And we thought that was important because if you're living with fibromyalgia, what's that like day to day? You can't plan ahead. and your activities and things you wanted to do may have to change based upon your symptoms. And that's a very stressing thing too. But how's that is going to impact your fibromyalgia? So this is based upon the peak time. So as we expected, the people peaking at all kinds of different times. So we can divide it into the early peak time, mid-range, and late peak time. So late peak time is like evening time. What we found was interesting, because if you're peaking late in the day, you're worse off. So in terms of the pain, fatigue, and how well you sleep, the people who peak towards the end of the day actually seems to have more trouble in terms of these symptoms and sleep efficiency. We also looked at the consistency. So sometimes if you're peaking in the morning one day, you're peaking in the afternoon the other day, so that's inconsistent. We're looking at the consistency of when you are peaking. When you're consistent, it's a good news because you do a little bit better in terms of pain, fatigue, and sleep. If you're all over the places in terms of your peaking time, your symptom tends to be a little bit worse. So this is a new way of looking at the activity levels and activity rhythms. We have more data on this, but the consistency seems to be an important portion. And, okay, good. Oh, I see. Okay, I'll get back to that a little bit more. So we talked about all these life circumstances, life events, life activities and domains that are so related to fibromyalgia. So it's important that we can perhaps try to tweak your life domain to make things a little easier in terms of dealing with fibromyalgia. Now, those things are not curative things, but that can make things a little easier for you to have a better quality of life. That's what we are looking at. So this was a very small pilot study we did using actually a 12-week more educational type of thing. So we had a nutritional education and lifestyle refinement to help you move a little bit more. So there's no exercise, there's no physical activity, physical therapy type of program in this one. But for obese fibromyalgia patients to see if we can help them lose weight and do a little bit better. So we're kind of very happy to see this. So we did not have exercise, like I said. But at the end of the 12-week program, on average, people lost about 8 pounds. And they continued to lose weight. So after the treatment was over, we didn't have anything. They're on their own. And 3 months later, they came back, and we measured them. And they seem to continue to lose a little bit of weight. So overall, they lost about 10 pounds. So body mass index-wise, it's a slight change, but there is a change. Waistline, hip line. So the waistline, at the 3 months, they lost about a little less than 2 inches, and the hip as well. So every inch counts. So we're very happy to see that change. But interestingly, even though we didn't have any exercise program or physical therapy program, the activity levels went up. So this is just a step count. But on average, about 1,000 steps more, so that's about half a mile more that they are moving. So we're quite happy with this result. It's not a huge thing, but it's just a tweaking a little something. And what we also looked at is, so if you lose weight, what would happen to your blood levels, right, for the health, overall health? So we looked at the people who lost weight by 1 body mass index. And the people who lost weight actually showed a significant decline in triglyceride and C-reactive protein, which is the inflammation index we're talking about. So just like tweaking a little bit. So it's not a huge program, it's not a huge effort, but tweaking a little bit can make some difference in health of fibromyalgia patients. So this was another treatment study we had. This had an actual physical therapy. It was a 10-week multimodal program with the physical activation, physical therapy. So we started out very slow, very low, like basically 65% to be a baseline ability. So we do a baseline assessment. We start out with low and slowly going up with the behavioral sort of a help, coping, as well as sort of motivational enhancement. It's very difficult to, I understand, stick with the program, and we wanted to help you stick with it, because if you can stick with it, actually there is some goodness happen to you. And for those 60 people who completed the program, decreased pain and fatigue significantly. So again, it's not a curative thing, but it's a significant decline. So in other words, they may have more good days, and I'm sure there are some bad days too, but there could be more good days for these people. I realized that when I was looking at it just before coming here, I made a mistake in this. This is very confusing, so I'm going to have to talk through it. So it's a small program again. It's a walking program. So what we had was 2 types of walking program, and it was kind of fun. You know the Huntsman Cancer Center and University Hospital. There's a bridge. It's a long way. That's where we did this. So people like marching off, and one program for the combination of walking with relaxation and stretching. So in the middle of the hallway, people doing and stretching as other people are walking by. So we are comparing that with just walking, just casual. And that was how many sessions? We had probably about 10 sessions of that, about 45 minutes each. What we found, we looked at the cortisol, that's a stress hormone level, and for just the walking people, so that's the top line, actually it went up. Whereas the people who had a combination of walking with the relaxation and stretching actually came down slightly, ever so slightly. But this was much more interesting to me. And my mistake was this is flipped. It's actually the top portion is the exercise plus, not exercise, walking plus relaxation stretching, and the lower portion is just walking. So this is a heart rate variability. So that is an index of how well your stress autonomic nervous system is working. So in this case, higher the better. The fibromyalgia is known to be associated with low heart rate variability. So based upon this, what we kind of came up with, it kind of goes up and down depending upon the session. But overall, if you just put the line, people who had the program, combination program of walking with relaxation and stretching actually were able to re-regulate the autonomic nervous system a little bit better than just a walking program. So physical exercise may need to have some sort of a combination to re-regulate your system, not just making you stronger. That might be important. So we talked about the behavioral rhythm thing. So we can, based upon that, we think we can do several different things. We can do the sleep-wake pattern management. So that's going to get to that a little bit. And peak behavioral time management, because we know that the peaking time is important in terms of symptom management. And the regularity, consistency of your routine may also be important. So if you cannot make something consistent, it doesn't have to be, you don't have to do same thing every day, all the time. I mean, that will make your life so boring. So you have to have some variability, but some things may need to be consistent. So actually, in my the pain management center, I started to do things like if you have a nighttime routine before you go to bed, I want you to do the same thing every day, every night. If you brush your teeth from the upper right corner, that's where you're going to start. So do something same every day may actually trigger some of the consistency factor in your life. So when you think about sleep-awake cycle, there are actually two kinds of drives that come into play. One is called the sleep homeostatic drive. The other one is circadian rhythm drive. So the sleep homeostatic drive looks like this. So time is just that I just put it in whatever you wake up. Let's say you wake up at 7 o'clock. So sleep drive has declined enough that you wake up. And through the day, you're building up actually the sleep drive. Your body is getting more and more sleepy. And at the time of the peak, you go to bed and you can sleep. So you wonder, so how come I'm not sleeping here? Because it's building up all the time. That is because there's an opposing actually drive that's a circadian rhythm. So this is kind of confusing, I know. It kind of flipped. So that the lower the level, the greater the sleep drive. Higher, meaning more alertness, waking drive. So this is the homeostatic status. So you're building up your sleep drive all day long. But look, the circadian rhythm is actually building up the waking drive. So there's two opposing things that's happening that's keeping you awake during the day, actually. You make a compromise somewhere around here that sleep load is pretty high, the wake loading is kind of coming down. That's the time that you can go to sleep. So if you think about it, all right, so this is, again, the sleep drive thing. Suppose you take a nap here, for whatever the reasons, your rhythm is dysregulated, and you say, oh, my sleep drive is so high, I'm going to go to sleep here. So your sleep drive goes down as a function of your napping. Tricky thing is that then you have to rebuild your sleep drive, and it takes time for that to get up. So by the time you want to reach the max for you to go to sleep, guess what? That's like 3 o'clock in the morning. So this is just a simplified version. But if you really think about how you want to manage your sleep-awake cycle, this kind of thing has to come into play. So a lot of the actual sleep treatment goes through this, and the nap restriction actually one of the things that we tend to do. I know it's hard to do. I love napping. It's just so good feels so good to have just a little snooze. But making sure that sleep drive doesn't drop so much so that it takes a long time to rebuild. That's important. So another thing we looked at is okay, so what happens if you actually do well with the treatment? This is another small study that this is actually now fibromyalgia patients, a more regular chronic pain group of people who received a cognitive behavioral treatment for sleep. So it's a non-pharmacological therapy for sleep. So this is nothing to do with actually pain treatment. They just treated sleep. But some people really did well with that and actually decreased their pain significantly. I think it was like 30% reduction of pain. So we looked at so there are people who did better with this, people who didn't. So what's the difference? So we wanted to see. So difference was this. This was the group of people. Half the people actually had the pain reduction of greater than 30%. And we looked at the activity levels by time for 24 hours on average, and the changes between the baseline before the treatment and post-treatment, that's after the treatment. You see the difference here, the increase here in the orange line. Whereas people who didn't show the change in the pain severity, actually pretty much the same, didn't change the activity level. But people who did better actually increased the activity levels in the morning. So it's kind of hard to see with this graph, but where the difference was actually in the morning. So earlier peaking time, you remember that? And that might have something to do with that when we can increase the activities in the morning, that might actually be more beneficial than just increasing overall activity level. So we got to be smart, right? Just not doing everything for everybody, but trying to target where it counts the most. So, as a conclusion, the life domains that matters to all of us. Actually, managing those issues, weight management, sleep management, activity pattern, rhythm management, actually seems to work together. And that seems to target the health, quality of life, and perhaps sort of the underlying neurophysiological status of fibromyalgia patients. So we continue to see how we can best tweak this life domain management therapy. So I have some information about our current research program. But if you are interested in taking one, that's great. And if you're interested in calling us to be on our list, because we tend to have different kinds of treatment studies going on, and we're happy to contact you and see if you'll be interested in participating. So thank you. And any questions? Yes.
The sleep drive graph was interesting to me because I'm one of those people. I have a terrible time with mornings. I am on a CPAP, and I have mixed problems. But anyway, the CPAP has helped immensely, and what it has helped is my sleep efficiency, because what they found was I was getting hardly any REM sleep, and I wasn't reaching sleep stage. But a lot of that has resolved. I don't know if it's resolved, but it has become better. But I still struggle with mornings. But as you were going through that graph, I thought, I am just the opposite of that graph, because I am tired in the morning, and then I kind of work my way up, and then I don't know about anybody else, but I suddenly at 11 o'clock at night, I'm wide awake. And I don't know how to switch that around.
One of the things we tested, there's a little light device we use to sort of try to re-regulate your rhythm. Because light, we have several drives we have to regulate our life cycle. And one of them, the light is actually one of the strongest things that can regulate. So it's some sort of light therapy, but it's a certain kind of light, that it's like eyeglasses. It's kind of like very science fiction look. You can be on the Star Trek movie with that. So that seems to help. And the circadian rhythm sort of re-regulation. Rhythm therapy has been done with other populations, non-pain populations. And some of that probably could be helpful. It's a long process, unfortunately. I hear, your problem is fairly common.
So there truly are people who are just
Absolutely.
out.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. So, but if that is impacting, if you determine if that's impacting the quality of life as well as the symptoms, the rhythm therapy,
Perhaps the light therapy could be helpful. So I believe the light thing is.
Is that something you've been doing?
No, we actually had my postdoc was doing a little study on that. He's kind of finishing it, but if you call us, we can get you the information about the light thing. It's commercially available, so yeah.
Is it true that you need to stay away from like phone screens, the blue light, and computer? I'm sorry. Is it true that you need to stay away from like computer screens, blue light? Does that all trigger non-sleep?
regular wisdom, obviously. I don't know if that's scientifically shown, but it clearly seems to dysregulate your onset of this sleep. So if you don't have a good onset, you may not getting into the good sleep pattern.
Yeah.
So if you have trouble with sleep, it's probably best not to tinker around too much before you go to bed.
Right. Okay, thank you. Okay. With the weight management, have you found that any particular type of restrictions with diets have worked? I'm constantly trying different things to see if anything will reduce my pain levels. I'm one of those people that it is intermittent. It's all the time, or it's not on a cycle. It doesn't peak at the same time. So the most success is by eliminating refined sugars and, candy, sweets, but that's not the full solution. So I'm forever trying elimination diets and things. But have you found any sort of pattern with one being better than another?
That's a good question. The answer, unfortunately, is no.
People who have done vegan diet, that they seem to feel better for a short period of time, but the maintenance of the benefit is kind of iffy in that. It seems to be that it has to go over and beyond just eating issues. You kind of have to look into the overall picture. Definitely weight management is going to be a good thing, no question about that. But you probably have to do it in a way that it's a tricky thing. That if you're stressed out, for example, by doing something that's good for you, the effect of that may be a little bit impaired, So best to find a way, approach that you don't stress yourself. Because the stress system is dysregulated in this disease. So you don't want to trigger that, So that's a tricky part. The stress management and the weight management kind of have to go together, hand in hand. So healthy diet is definitely a good thing. There's no question about that. But doing that along with other things probably is important.
Do you suggest more clean eating
Like
opposed to non-processed foods?
it's probably healthier, although some, I'm a big fan of cornbread. So it's
Me too.
so occasional.
That's your
Yeah.
just go-to comfort food.
Yeah,
Corn dog once in a while.
Again, it's a quality of life issue as well. You can be like a saint in terms of eating, but if you are not enjoying your life, I don't know. So you kind of have to find a happy,
How long and how often were the patients doing the physical therapy exercise that showed improvement in their pain levels?
That was a weekly session of 60 minutes. That, something like a 5 minutes, 10 minutes warm up and 5 minutes cool down. So that's 45 minutes. And I believe that they're walking for 20 minutes, or 15, and some of the TheraBand, what the TheraBand is, of the strengthening and stretching program. And we have some homework to do. And our recommendation was this, you can have a bad day, you can have a greater symptom day. When that happens, we said that you can reduce the duration, you can reduce the intensity, but you still do it. Even if you have to do 2 minutes of walking, you still do it. That was our recommendation. So usually about half an hour on a daily basis in terms of homework.
So 7 days a week, half an hour?
5 days a week.
5 days.
You can have some.
And then when you talk about the peak time, is that the time you would want to do your exercising as well?
It doesn't have to be the exercise. I think it's more life activities. So, yeah, could be you going to grocery shopping.
Like moving activities?
Yeah.
Okay.
You're not sitting down watching just television basically. So you're doing something like cooking, cleaning, any sort of daily activity.
Okay, we'll take the next question from our Facebook Live audience.
So we have a question from our Facebook audience. One of the most popular drugs prescribed for fibromyalgia is gabapentin. One of the side effects is heavy weight gain. I wasn't heavy until I got fibromyalgia and started taking gabapentin. So what do you suggest a person take if this is what their doctor is prescribing? It's not like you have a say in how much weight it makes you gain.
Well, that's unfortunately a common thing I hear a lot. Gabapentin.
And pregabalin, that's a Lyrica, both. It just varies. Some people are doing fine with the medications, and some people just gain so much weight. And weight gain is not helpful in terms of general health. And you don't feel good if you gain too much weight. So when that happens, I usually recommend that that person goes back to the prescribing physician and talk about it. Because there are other options. You know, you can probably switch that, taper it down, switch that to other things like Cymbalta and duloxetine, which doesn't have as much weight gain issues. We look into other areas of weight management as well. But when the weight gains due to the medication, it's very difficult to manage that. So the open discussion with the prescribing physician is probably a good idea. That's at least a good first step.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have any other questions, comments?
Nobody else is going to ask, are you? Here's your opportunity. Exactly. The trouble is coming.
Okay, so as far as managing all of this and the whole pain thing,
Yeah.
are you doing anything with low dose naltrexone? Have you looked into that? And also with everything that's coming up now with medical marijuana, cannabinoids.
Yeah.
So how do they fit in with what you perceive as pain management?
Naloxone. It's an interesting question, and the data's a little mixed, but it's an interesting question. How much of your internal medicine, endogenous opioid system, should get activated? So there's a lot of thinking about, for example, if you're taking opioid medications. So if you're taking outside opioid medications, how that is going to influence your own ability to regulate your pain system, particularly the opioid, endogenous opioid system is.
So, do you know what are you talking about the I'm sorry, are you talking about the cannabis now, or are you talking about the low dose naltrexone?
Yeah, not the cannabis.
Oh, that's not an opioid, is that?
No, it's
It's okay. So I
didn't know that.
Yeah.
so and how that is going to. So one of the things in fibromyalgia is we all have the ability to inhibit pain. That's an built-in system, and that is impaired in fibromyalgia. So it's a descending pathways that is a little dysregulated, and there's a suggestion that if you're taking opioids, so that's the opposite of naloxone, that might impair also with that ability. And that's probably the system of opioid. Your internal opioid system is involved in that. So re-regulating that with naloxone, in theory, should restore that and might be better. But the large study has to be done. So I haven't. Another problem is it's very expensive now, and not very available to. Because I wanted to do a little project to it, I can't get that from the investigational pharmacy. I was told that you're going to go bankrupt if I try to do it. So okay, I'm going to wait. And the cannabis thing, there are a couple of studies on fibromyalgia with using the medical marijuana. And again, the results slight effect on pain and huge effect on anxiety. So it seems to regulate mood quite well, and how much of that impact it has on pain, particularly for the long run, is unknown. So I think we are fairly cautious about that at this point. So I'm hoping that people in Colorado or Washington will be able to answer that question. But there are a lot of unknowns. So some people basically say that we need more research, and I tend to agree with that. But that's a difficult area. Promising, perhaps. But.
So, can you tell me what our own natural opioid system is? Is that our own natural endocannabinoids?
So it's covers multiple things, but the ones that's known is the endogenous opioid system.
For example,
Some of the
like acupuncture, let's say. So you stick the needles in and you feel better. When you do the naloxone injection to wipe out your endogenous opioid, that effect is gone. So that is that usually suggests that what the acupuncture may be doing, maybe to really facilitate your own internal pain medicine. So I'm sorry, I kind of got I know. So that happens in many different ways, but we do have the ability. And for example, that if you jam your toe and you say, oh, and you kind of rub it, so you are actually imposing a little bit of tactile stimulation on top of your pain, right? And that reduces, guess what? That reduces your pain. That's a strange thing if you really think about it. If you hit something and you're putting more things to it and actually inhibiting your pain, that also is considered as part of the endogenous opioid, your internal ability to inhibit pain. And the treatment that should maximize that ability to inhibit probably is important, and some people are looking into that. So hopefully more things will come.
yes.
I didn't know if they might have some research or on the correlation between seasons or like cold versus hot or the barometric pressure. I haven't seen any research, but I didn't know if you might know of some.
Not so much of the whole environment. I mean, you hear that a lot.
You know, and when it's cold, it's much harder for people to tolerate a lot of things. But of course, the amount of light that that's seasonal, right? And so that the people talk about seasonal affective, seasonal depression type of things. That may have a little bit of impact, although epidemiology is not there, so I can't say anything definitive. But given that how the rhythm is important, the amount of light exposure may also be important. So that varies by the season, and that's associated with the cold.
I've read different papers that talk about one of the only things that has been identified is magnesium deficiency in fibromyalgia patients. And I don't know if that's empirical or anecdotal, but have you found that there are any supplement deficiencies, vitamins, minerals, or anything at all with a broad spectrum of fibromyalgia patients?
Anything that people find seems to so vary across individuals. So yes, there might be some people who might benefit from the supplements, but it doesn't seem to speak for everyone, and that's the struggle we have. So we cannot do one size fit all, and we really have to consider other factors. But I think the amount of deficiency. I mean, we also actually looked into vitamin D level, and and it's very common. The deficiency is very common. But if you are like super low, that might influence your pain levels. So we did look into that, and the vitamin C, vitamin
Is low in fibromyalgia patients as well. So that might also impact. So it's
it's probably multiple things. I'm not aware that the magnesium supplement helps. It generally helps with the muscle pain if you are deficient. But if you're not deficient, you might end up having more tummy issues with the magnesium. That might be unpleasant.
No studies that
I
you know
don't
of.
know. Yeah, I'm not
No
aware.
studies.
Okay, any other questions? All right, I guess that's a wrap. Thank you so much, Dr. Kiko.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.